The chair recognizes the honourable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank Almighty God for this opportunity to once again address the Bahamian people on behalf of the residents of Marco City and, by extension, Bahamians everywhere who have sent us here to represent their interests. Madam Speaker, as we meet to discuss the Bridge Authority Amendment Act of 2024, we meet at a time where many Bahamians are extremely challenged. So, Madam Speaker, today I hope to address several critical issues that affect our people and to reflect a bit, Madam Speaker, on the last 3 years of governance in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam Speaker, I remember those families, as all members, I'm sure, in this House do, who've lost loved ones since we last met. I remember one particular weekend in Marco City, we buried 7 residents. 2 were buried on Friday, 5 on Saturday. It is an extremely difficult time for so many families as we come to this place to do work on their behalf. And I want to extend condolences to all of those families that are grieving throughout the Bahamas, and most especially those persons in Marco City who've lost loved ones, to encourage you to lean on God, who has promised to provide the peace that passes all understanding, to help us cope with the big gap that has been left in our lives because of persons who we have lost. And I know that God is faithful to provide peace and healing in the midst of our individual storms. I'd also, Madam Speaker, like to thank all of those persons who have contributed to the range of social outreach programs that we have administered in the constituency, but also our attempt to augment what is being done through social services in providing a social safety net to the country. Many of us in this place have ourselves designed programs to reach the most vulnerable Bahamians, because no matter how much resources is allocated by central government, it's clearly not enough to reach many of the vulnerable citizens who are in our community. And so I want to say to corporate partners, to private citizens, thank you for your support. In Marco City, we developed a reputation of working with persons across the political divide, because we recognize that it does not matter which organization you belong to politically. Poverty does not check your political registration before afflicting you, and crime, which has become constant in this Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In fact, law enforcement agencies acknowledge that violent crimes have increased. Murders in particular has gone up. And we, all of us, must appreciate that it is not confined to anyone of any particular political persuasion. And so again, we stand, Madam Speaker, in solidarity with Bahamians who are contributing to social outreach initiatives, anti-crime initiatives. We launched in the Free National Movement an anti-crime initiative, had 21 of our associations put together either public service announcement, launch youth mentoring programs, et cetera, because we believe we have to be a part of the solution. Madam Speaker, we are also engaged across 39 constituencies in infrastructural work as we seek to help persons with small home repairs, because there are many people who are afflicted by previous hurricanes who have not yet been made whole, Madam Speaker. Today, we are looking at an amendment that we believe is important. As was stated earlier, the Free National Movement thought it important to put in place the Bridge Authority. We have a philosophical position, and that philosophical position is that more Bahamians are able to participate in the governance of our country if we appoint suitably qualified persons to authorities, commissions, and, of course, to boards. And that is precisely why we believe that boards should not be tribalistic in nature. We need persons with institutional memory on boards. And so even when governments change, it is our goal to ensure that there are persons who survive the change of government on boards so that we do not have massive disruption in terms of the institutional memory as well as expertise that can assist the new board in transitioning to support whatever that agenda is of the new government. And if we are true to what we said, which is that we are both committed to a national development plan, then there shouldn't be radical variation in many of the things that we do. And so we support the amendment. However, we do say to the government, as has been pointed out, that nowhere we see in the legislation where provisions are made for an executive chairman. The last chairman, Greg Barnaby, a talented, outstanding Bahamian, I think he made $1,000 a month as the chairman. And obviously an executive chairman is making substantially more, and under this administration I would not be surprised if it's north of $60,000, especially since if my memory serves me correctly, there's a very talented Bahamian who's been put in place there, Pedro Roll, and if that is the Pedro who was at BPL, then certainly you'd have to be compensating him properly because one, I mean, he's talented. Two, unfortunately, this government unceremoniously removed him from BPL. No doubt another talented Bahamian is there based on all I've read of the young lady who now holds that position. She's quite gifted, but clearly this would have been a parachute provided to Pedro because Pedro has been loyal to the PLB's cause, and it's most unfortunate how he has been treated. And again, much like the former deputy chair, they had a talented deputy chair there, I think, Danny Ferguson, who similarly has been treated quite badly. And so I find it quite remarkable as we reflect on the track record of this administration. It was most unfortunate on the 3rd anniversary that the marker that was used by the deputy prime minister and often by the prime minister is the things they felt we did not accomplish when we were in government. And it is amazing, 3 years later, a government should be talking about its record. What are the concrete things we have done that affects the majority of Bahamians? And this government is hard-pressed to identify those things that have had massive or broad-based impact on ordinary Bahamians, and particularly Bahamians who are in a vulnerable position. This administration is challenged to identify them. So if they were tempted to talk about an attempt to move towards livable wages by that small increase to the base salary, then quickly Bahamians respond, you have increased electricity bill over the last 3 years multiple times, which has evaporated any marginal increase that you have provided through an attempt to go towards a livable wage. If you want to talk about the reduction in VAT, then you would have to explain the creation of VAT on items where VAT did not exist. And so those persons who are buying medicine will remember this government's additional VAT, this government's VAT on medicine, VAT on insurance, VAT on breadbasket items. And so, again, 3 years later, we should be talking about the broad-based impact that has been made on Bahamians. Are Bahamians less in despair today than they were based on the promises from the blueprint of change? Because at the end of the day, this relentless untruth that they opened the economy when clearly none of the agencies that they have identified, multilateral agencies internationally, or any of the local assessments agree with that. The economy was already reopening. It was a global phenomenon that during the period of the last general election, there was a transition from a pandemic period to a reopening of the economy. That is why this government met 14% economic growth when it came to power. However, despite everything the government has done and claimed that it has done, We have now returned to the government's projection of a 1.1% economic growth on their watch. 14% when they came to office because of a reopening of the economy and a roaring back of demand for travel and commerce. And now, 3 years in, they are unable to sustain 14% or 10% or 8% or 5% or 4% or 3%. The projection of the Davis administration is 1.1%. And so I find it most unfortunate that we came back to talk serious business about how we could affect the lives of people who are hurting. The more than 200 persons in West Grand Bahama whose homes they thought was going to be fixed during the by-election, only to find out that those contractors have slowed their roll, and many of whom have disappeared, and some of whom are now asking for payment of works having been carried out even prior to the by-election. And throughout Grand Bahama, small contractors are still asking for the funds that they expected this government to pay. Hundreds of homes throughout Grand Bahama, again, untouched by small home repair. It is a serious issue, and so we should be very careful. And so I find it unfortunate that no less than the Deputy Prime Minister would come in here and make some of the statements that he made. But let me, before addressing those very specifically, say that I understand and I sympathize with the Deputy Prime Minister because I know the tremendous pressure Exuma is under. Again, the Prime Minister and the Chairman, the member for Fox Hill, have sought to marginalize him in Grand Bahama. He was the champion for the PLP in Grand Bahama after the general election. And after multiple false starts with the hotel and airport, clearly his voice and the little light, what was left of the torch in him, is dim now. And so what we are finding is that he is fighting for his dear life to maintain, if only the number 2 position, though we know his aspirations are much higher. And so he came in here under that tremendous pressure and weight of the diminished role that he now must play, seeking to train the proverbial gun on the leader of the opposition and the Free National Movement. It's most unfortunate because we were pulling for the young man who's a part of our generation. But I wish to remind him, I have not been the beneficiary of what he's been the beneficiary of. He's the beneficiary, he talked about indirectly Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Youth, 2 ministries that I've had the good fortune to preside over. I didn't have the benefit of walking into tourism that was constantly breaking records in terms of the uptick in the number of tourists. He came into a ministry that was on autopilot, and the numbers continued to run, especially after pandemic. The pent-up demand provided or facilitated an increased number of tourists that came to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The question is, for the member for Exuma, what have you done specifically that have moved the needle in the right direction? Name the policy or initiative or course of action that you have taken that have moved the country in the right direction in financial services and investments, or even in tourism, which we know to be on autopilot in many, many ways, and the technical staff who continue to execute continue to do a yeoman's job. What have you done? And let us go further. With the record numbers, how do we explain, with VAT receipts ahead of projected timeline for collection, hitting the 9 million plus mark in tourist arrivals, how do you explain that we are now headed clearly to a 1.1% economic growth under the Davis-Cooper administration? What impact have you been able to have? And furthermore, we asked the member for Exuma, what about that hotel sale that was announced so triumphantly to the bombing on desk of members who are now quiet? What has happened to the multiple announcements of the pending sales that have not emerged? We do not boast in it. We do not have any measure of satisfaction in it because we wish for our people to be both owners as well as to be fully employed. But we do have concerns. when there are members of parliament steeped in arrogance who would get up and not take sensible advice, which is not to oversell and underdeliver. It is better to be measured in your projections, work hard every day, and deliver the results that can change people's lives. Exuma has failed in that regard, and his colleagues right along with him. Secondly, what has happened to the airport? The airport that was announced over and over and over again. We continue to hear the announcements about, when the phase 1 will be completed and phase 2. Well, we are almost at the deadline for the completion of phase 1, and phase 1 has not gotten underway yet. The program has stalled over and over again, and it's our understanding that a tremendous amount of infighting in the Progressive Liberal Party and its cabinet, competing interests, have negatively affected the movement of a project that is crucial to the economic development of the island. The sale of the hotel and the transformation of the airport, they are twins in the fight to revitalize the overall economy of Grand Bahama. We need cabinet ministers who will act in the best interests of our country with very little concern on whether or not their man or their woman is getting their fair share of any initiative. We need colleagues to work in tandem with each other. Remember, it was a project that moved from a public-private partnership where the private partner would have brought resources, expertise to manage the airport, and the government would have made available the land that it had, the historical expertise that is resident in the public service, would have assisted in terms of joint advertisement, et cetera, and other incentives that would have facilitated the development of the airport. And in a similar way, the government would have provided support for the hotel. But both of them have stalled. Both projects have stalled. And so the government is now engaging in smoke and mirrors about its commitment to the people of Grand Bahama. And so we say to the member for Exuma, we understand the pressures that you're under, but be careful at how you target members opposite or target the opposition, because the reality is many of your senior members were present in past cabinets where some interesting decisions, unfortunate decisions were made, and they held their nose and kept moving with those administrations. So don't act brand new. And in this case, the member for Exuma sat in a cabinet where you have multiple cabinet ministers who have made some of the most egregious decisions. Decisions that have caused the member for Fort Charlotte to be shuffled from BPL because of misleading this House and managed to survive that process. Or the member for Carmichael, who through multiple instances made decisions in the Department of Immigration that still has to be examined. Dozens of questions today on the record of this House that have not yet been answered to explain decisions that he would have made, despite the objections of senior civil servants, one of whom has retired, another one is still home. And we believe because of the pressures and decisions of this administration. Or a permanent secretary that is suing both the head of the country and our government ministers because of how they had been dealt with. So let's not act brand new. And if you're using a government that is out as the litmus test to determine how well you're doing, you have lost your way. And so today, as we engage in discussions about infrastructural development, we support bridges that are certainly throughout the Family Islands being put under the Bridge Authority with smart Bahamians who can develop formulas based on international best practices on how to raise resources to build, replace, repair, or maintain bridges throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, save and except for those that are under the purview of the port area, because the port itself has an obligation to ensure that those bridges are built, replaced, maintained, and of course, if there are any new bridges, that they would be constructed as a result of the formulas that they use in that area. I'm a property owner in Tambourine Development in Grand Bahama, apart from where I live now. And I do know that the Tino Beach Bridge is a bridge that the Grand Bahama Port Authority, as in conjunction with Tambourine Development, has an obligation to repair and build. It is my understanding that the Tino Beach Bridge will cost some $2.2 million to construct, that the assessments have been done. I believe the engineer, Nick Dean, has been involved in that project. Requests for proposals have already gone out. Several companies have bid on that particular bridge, and that it will, within 30 days, work should begin on that bridge, that there are weekly updates on whether or not there are any challenges or concerns about the integrity of that bridge. And so as residents, we are monitoring, and we intend to, of course, hold GBPA's feet to the fire so that they can move in a timely fashion to ensure that that bridge is, in fact, replaced. It will be a new construction. The utilities, I'm advised, the shifting of the utilities from where it presently is will cost somewhere around $200,000, and that is going to be addressed during the course of the $2.2 million construction of that bridge. And so, Madam Speaker, we support this amendment. We believe that the government should unveil its bold vision for how, on these various boards, they are able to populate it with talented persons who are able to help raise the requisite resources and, of course, to put out a strategic plan, in this case, on how they will deal with bridges throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Prior to us demitting office, we know that we had left on the books a plan where we were going to, in fact, issue bonds in order to raise capital to continue some of the works that we had envisioned. As you would have heard earlier, we built at least 5 bridges when we were in the chair. The glass bottom bridge, the glass window bridge was one of those projects that was on its way. The designs, in fact, had been done under the Honorable Desmond Bannister. A cultural village was designed to be at the base of that bridge, and of course, one of the ways in which we thought that resources would have been raised is, of course, bonds is a wonderful idea, but no doubt this administration can have a number of other creative ideas around how it would be done. I believe the figure mentioned at one point was 20 million. Maybe the minister at some point can comment on what he thinks will be the figure. But it is important for us to have continuity in these significant initiatives where it is relevant. One of the things that troubled me in the contribution made earlier this morning is to hear, Madam Speaker, a wealthy member of the House crack jokes about Bahamians receiving water. We are called upon in this House to do everything possible to impact people's lives in meaningful ways. We will not always get it right, but our heart ought to consistently be in the right place. And for whatever negative impact we think the actions of persons opposite may have on what we are trying to accomplish politically, we should never lose our way and make light of the important work that's being done to touch Bahamians who are in a tough position. We have said, prior to going into Eleuthera, North and South, that we believe the solutions to Eleuthera's problem, both in terms of electricity and water, and I should go further, more than both, also with respect to connectivity, because they have tremendous problems with cable and internet as well. We believe we need a permanent solution. But while we are working out the permanent solution, we ought to do everything we can to make the burden of persons lighter. And that's what we sought to do. That's what we sought to do. And that's what we didn't go in and attack the member for Central and South Eleuthera. We didn't go in and attack the member for North Eleuthera. We talked, you should say that on your feet. We didn't go in and attack them. We went in to meet a need. We ain't studying you. We're studying the members of parliament. We're studying the people who we are called to serve. And to hear the member for Exuma, who has a deep freeze, I understand, that is rotting in Ragged Island on the dock, rotting wherever he placed it, because fishermen would not sell their crawfish, cousin Freetown, and their fish to him or to whoever was representing with the deep freeze. It's there. Nobody's using it. And to represent in this House through public relations campaigns, school is open, school will be open on time and everything is fine, when we know the same cousin who ain't been to Ragged Island recently, Marco City, but our relatives are telling us constantly our children are called to go in the Anglican church where desks and chairs are set up because the furniture ain't reached yet. The school is not yet open. The teachers are not on island. Both of the teachers are still in Nassau. And I know both of their names. Doesn't matter. How many students isn't the issue. Remember, Ragged Island, Exuma and Ragged Island beat us when we were in government for what we ought to have done, and he was correct then. And the population wasn't a whole lot different. The bottom line is the principle of meeting the needs. And now that you are in the chair, just tell people the truth. Don't tell them school is ready to go. And parents are saying, our children ain't going to the Anglican school. You got a multi-million-dollar school that we know is an excellent school because the contractor is exceptional. So when we wish to play politics with this public and give the impression of our commitment and our productivity demonstrated, multi-million-dollar school there, a small Anglican church, and we thank God for the Anglican church and their commitment to education and willingness to facilitate us. But why hasn't the member of parliament done his job to ensure that they could have moved from a wonderful institution that's helping us to the institution that was designed to accommodate our children? Don't put up pictures saying one thing and the residents know different. And when we talk about the terminal, the same terminal we talked about in the previous debate, I mean, wasn't it another one of our cousins, Miss Moxie, the island administrator, who reached out to the contractor and asked him, listen, the material is already on the island, left behind by our administration. Go ahead and build the terminal. Of course, the member of parliament show up to play a role in the opening ceremony. I respect that. Some so. I know he didn't. The question being raised from my cousin Exuma in his chair is we didn't build it. We know that the island administrator played the pivotal role in making sure the structure got up, and we don't want anyone representing that they did a yeoman's job because they didn't do it then and they ain't doing it now. When you benefit from autopilotness, things that are happening quite logically, do not sell us a dream of how productive and serious you are about governance as if others are not. That's the point that I'm making. That's what I'm saying. And so, Madam Speaker, with those few words, I want to say that we support the Bridge Amendment. But what we do not support is the smoke and mirrors that the very same government that has increased taxes, increased the misery index for many Bahamians, have been an albatross around the necks of businesses, shortening the time for VAT reporting, requiring audited accounts where not necessary, carrying an armed crew into businesses under the guise of talking about compliance. Same administration. This same administration that cannot find the $50 million to help small business development 3 years later will not talk about their record, but would instead talk about COVID and Dorian. The same administration that has had no COVID, had no Dorian, but has been unable to show where the billions of dollars that they continue to fly around the world to come back and tell us, this is the return on your investment, us sitting at a table signing yet another loan. With those words, Marco City rests.
Thank you, Honourable Member Asmini.